Hi everyone, my name is Jan-Henrik and I'm happy to present you our paper Collaborating Across Realities, Analytical Lenses for Understanding Dyadic Collaboration in Transitional Interfaces. This is a collaboration from us at the University of Lübeck together with Daniel Schacht, Niklas Peper, Anita Hamurculu and my PhD supervisor Christian Jetter. First, let me give you a brief overview of our paper. We investigated transitional interfaces. These interfaces are composed of different contexts. These contexts can be interpreted as subsystems that are distributed on the reality-virtuality continuum. As you can see on the figure, we built such a transitional interface with three contexts. First, reality provided by a desktop PC. Second, augmented reality through a handheld tablet. And third, virtual reality through a VR HMD. Users can freely switch between these contexts at any time, and with that, users always have the best possible visualizations and interaction techniques for their current task at hand. We wanted to explore how dyadic collaboration can be analyzed within those systems. Therefore, we invited dyads to work together on a spatial optimization task within our lab. Each participant had one device for each context, so dyads could collaborate in all possible combinations of contexts at any time. To be able to analyze transitional collaboration, we have developed 4 analytical lenses derived from our user study. Each lens contains visualizations and are complemented by various quantitative metrics. After this brief overview, let's dive right in. Our main contribution are 4 analytical lenses that can help analyze transitional collaboration. But why did we look into this? First, transitional interfaces are an emergent technology that is yet underexplored given the fact that the hardware is constantly evolving. And since the very beginning with the magic book from Billinghurst et al. In 2001, collaboration was an integral part of transitional interfaces. But we think that there are insufficient tools or frameworks to analyze such collaboration. Therefore, we think that our paper fits a relevant gap within this research topic. To develop our analytical lenses, we conducted a user study with 34 participants. They worked on a time-capped and sufficiently complex spatial optimization task in which participants needed to design the illumination of a fictitious urban park. During that task, we collected qualitative as well as quantitative data through the prototype and our observations. As a first step of our analysis, we ensured that the task was understood and sufficiently complex. After that study validation, we clustered our qualitative observations in a digital whiteboard, using affinity diagrams to create thematical clusters. From these, we choose 4 clusters based on our estimation of their relevance to be further examined within our lenses. The resulting lenses therefore are 1. Place and distance, 2. Temporal patterns, 3. Group use of contexts, and 4. Individual use of contexts. Unfortunately, we can't cover all lenses in great detail, but I want to show you our second lens, temporal patterns, as an example. This lens uses a line chart to visualize the use of a transitional interface over time. The x-axis of the chart represents the 45 minutes of session time. And on the y-axis, we then can mark our 3 contexts based on their position on the reality-virtuality continuum. Within this chart, we can now plot the temporal usage of the first participant in blue and of the second in orange. This allows us to immediately identify interesting phases and patterns in temporal usage. For example, we can see here phases in which both participants used the same device and therefore collaborated in co-context combinations, while in these phases, participants worked in different contexts, so-called cross-context combinations. We can also see phases with few transitions and phases with frequent transitions. In order to quantify the number of transitions, we calculated the frequency of transitions f-trans by dividing the dyad's total number of transitions by the 45 minutes of session time. Such analyses are not only interesting for the individual teams. For getting the bigger picture on how dyads collaborated, we can use our visualizations as small multiples, where each dyad is represented by one chart described before. With these small multiples, some similarities and differences immediately become apparent. For example, we got 4 dyads with a high transition frequency and 4 dyads with a comparably low frequency. We also observed that 9 dyads started their session with an exploration phase dominated with co-context collaboration. As highlighted here, this means that dyads explored the system together by switching through the same devices at the same time. This phase lasted for varying lengths of time, quantified by our metric t exp below each small multiple. Overall, This lens provides insight into how participants use the transitional interface over time. This can help in identifying different phases of collaboration. Unfortunately, we can't cover the other lenses in the same detail, but I'd still like to briefly touch on what the other lenses do. Here we have what we call context triforces from our third lens, which examines the group use of contexts. These can be interpreted as a visual fingerprint or a visual hash of how a dyad has used the transitional interface. The structure of these triforces are basically a graph with nodes and edges. The nodes are representing all possible context combinations a dyad could work in, while the edges represent the changes between those combinations. Each size of the nodes is scaled by the time that dyad was in that respective context combination. The thickness of an edge is scaled by how often dyads made a change between those combinations. With that, we can now compare how the dyads use the transitional interface as a group. For example, these dyads followed a similar strategy, which can also be seen in the temporal lens. Accordingly, the triforces also look very similar. On the other hand, these dyads seem to have had different approaches to using the transitional interface. Therefore, the triforces are very different. While this lens gives us insight into how the dyads use the transitional interface, the fourth lens can give us insight into how the individual participants behaved. These little triangles in blue and orange work the same way as the triforces. They visually represent a fingerprint or a hash of the individual use of a transitional interface. Just like in the temporal lens, participant 1 of a dyad is represented in blue and the partner is represented in orange. These little triangles are again graphs with nodes and edges. The nodes are now representing a single context in which a participant could work, and the edges are the transitions between those contexts. The size of a node is again scaled with the time a participant spent in that specific context, and the edges are again scaling with the number of transitions between those contexts. With these, we can go even deeper into the analysis of the collaborative behavior. Take these two dyads as an example. The group strategy seemed to be quite similar, but the individual participants used the transitional interface very different. This shows us that both group use and individual use of context seem to be two different aspects of collaboration, which can be uncovered using our lenses 3 and 4. But as I mentioned, there's much more to discover within our paper. For example, we have another lens that examines the virtual distance of both participants within the shared workspace. We found that this distance was dependent on the context combination the dyad was currently working in. We also provide detailed analysis on our task and share interesting insights into our qualitative observations. For more information, please have a look at our paper and do not hesitate to contact us. Thank you for your attention.